Yesterday we were talking about the Eved Ivri. And so we were speaking about Parshas Yisrael. We're on 4:16. So 4:16, 4:18. So we were speaking about the idea that the Eved Ivri, yesterday we had mentioned the idea that he's allowed to marry this non-Jewish maidservant. And he produces children for the master. So one of the commentaries says that the reason that and we said that this is limited to a married man, not a single man. One of the commentaries points out that for the married man, it's a source of, it'll hopefully discourage him from stealing. In other words, a guy steals, that's how he becomes an Eved Ivri, because the Beis Din sells him, because he can't pay back. The fact that he's going to have non-Jewish children will be something that may discourage him from stealing, because he realizes now he's going to he's going to go to this owner who could give him the non-Jewish woman. Then he has no choice but to produce these children, and having non-Jewish children, which he's eventually going to have to leave. And he is as a married man who has children, it understands the connection between himself and his children. So knowing that he won't have this connection, so maybe they'll discourage him. And therefore they'll be deterrent. A single guy doesn't have his own children, so he doesn't understand what the connection is between a father and a child. And since he doesn't understand the connection between a father and child, that won't be a deterrent for him, therefore he can't marry her. Now, there's this interesting statement. The Gemara says that an Eved Ivri serves his father by day and by night. What does that mean? He has to serve by day. So the Gemara says, during the day he works, and at night he has to produce children with this non-Jewish maidservant. That's what the Gemara says. Eved Ivri serves his master by day and by night. Okay, that's the plain meaning. The Nesivos Shalom, one of the classic Hasidic commentaries, he says that statement of the Gemara that Eved Ivri serves the master by day and by night is actually it's really addressing all Jews. Every one of us is what's called an Eved Ivri. An Eved Ivri means that we have to serve the master. Who's the master? The master is the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu by day and by night. Daytime always represents when things are going well. We're upbeat. Things are going well, the sun is shining. Nighttime is when there are ordeals and challenges and things are a little down. Everybody could serve when they're feeling good and the stock market is up and you got enough to eat and you're getting along and like you're just in one of those zones where you're just kind of cruising along. Anybody could serve then. The trick is that when things are not so good, when things are challenging, then a person serves Rebbe Shem. That's already the sign of a true Eved. You serve even at night. And the classic example is, in the Holocaust, for example. Elie Wiesel's first book, by the way, was called Night. That was his first night, where he describes his experiences in the Holocaust. And so you have somebody like the Klausenberger Rebbe. The Klausenberger Rebbe lost a wife and either 8 children or 11 children. I'm not sure. I don't remember how much it was in the Holocaust. He was 4 years in Auschwitz. He was on the death march. He was everything that happened to anybody. It happened to the Klausenberger Rebbe. Yet he never ate non-kosher food in the 4 years he was there. Never had any non-kosher food. And somebody once saw him Shabbos afternoon in the concentration camp looking to find out if somebody had a peel of an onion. No. It's midnight. And you're not trying to kill it. One of those, especially with that noise. Thanks, Moshe. Takes a second, right? It's like your grandpa sitting down. It takes a while to get, to stop krechzing. Till all the joints, what do you call it? Just rip it out of the wall, Ron. Just rip that whole thing out of the wall. The what do you call it? Good try, anyway. Oh, thank you. The magic wand. So say he was walking around looking for an onion peel on Shabbos afternoon in the concentration camps. Somebody said, "Why are you looking for the onion peel?" Good try, Ron. Just rip it off the wall. There you go. So he said, "Why are you looking for an onion peel?" He said, "Because there's a minhag. There are people who have a minhag at the third meal on Shabbos. They eat something called, I think it's called sibila, which is egg and onions. Have you ever seen that minhag? They eat egg and onions. And the Kleisenberger Rabbi, even in the concentration camp, even on a minhag, he wasn't willing to neglect the minhag. You're serving by night. You're serving by night. Anybody could. I've never been impressed personally. I'm not impressed with people who could go without sleep. Sometimes people are able to push themselves on very little sleep. That doesn't impress me. I've done it. I've had to do it. You have little kids who are up in the middle of the night. I once worked a night job on a loading dock. Yeah, I'm not impressed by that. What impresses me is a person who's going on little sleep and maintains their midos. A person who's going on little sleep and is barking at everybody around them, I'm not impressed by that. I could do that too. Anybody could do that. Anybody can do that. That's not true service of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. True service of a Kodesh Baruch Hu is when you're going on, you're sleep deprived, and you still manage to what do you call it? I'll give you a tip. You guys should pay me for this. When you're married to Mirat Hashem and you're on your third or fourth night in a row where the two of you have been up in the middle of the night because the baby or babies have been up and one is waking up the other and you're ready to jump off a roof, and the best thing to do at that point is don't talk. Just don't talk. Do what you have to do, don't talk. That's already a high bandrega. To talk nicely at that point is already science fiction, right? So let's not go there. But and it could easily turn into a what do you call it? A spit? What's it called? A spat? A tiff? A spat? Whatever it's called. You could easily say something. And you're both vulnerable as could be. And the best thing at that point is you don't talk at all. That's what it means that an Eved Ivri serves Hashem, serves by his master by day and by night. So I'll tell you two stories, two incredible stories. One of them, I get into a cab, and this was in 2003. I know for a fact it was 2003. I get in the cab. Cab driver is driving a beat up cab. He's wearing a yarmulke. It doesn't look like he's in great shape. And we start driving. We're on Began Highway. And also some car, cut us off, did something really stupid on there. So I turned to the cab driver. I just said, I must be an Arab. So the cab driver looked at me and goes, I know them a little better than you do. I could smell a story a mile away. Right? So I said, oh, how so? So he said to me, he was in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War. He was in a tank division on the Syrian Heights, on the Golan Heights. On the first day of the war, his entire unit was overrun by the Syrian army. The entire unit was annihilated, except him and 7 other guys who were taken as captives by the Syrians. He said to me he was in captivity for a year, 6 months, and 3 days. In Syrian captivity. He said after 3 weeks, somebody came from the Red Cross, and that was the only time they saw anybody from outside. He was tortured, he was electric shocks, he was put in solitary confinement. And then, after about a year, 6 months, and 3 days, or a year and 6 months, whatever it was, the Syrians take him out of his cell. They take him into a room. Now, the Syrians knew that in 3 days there's going to be a prisoner exchange with the Israelis. He did not know that. He had no idea. They didn't tell him. They took him out of the room. They brought him into the room. They cut open his back with a commando knife, and they inserted a tracking device inside his back and then stitched him up, all without anesthesia, because they knew that when in this prisoner exchange, so then they're going to be taking him to an Israeli army base, and that way they could track him. 3 days later, he's in his cell in agony, and they come in and they throw him some clothes. They put your clothes on, and you're going home in 15 minutes. He told me they also tortured them psychologically because he didn't know what happened. All he saw on the first day of the war was his entire unit was annihilated. They told him the Syrians had won the war. The entire country of Israel was annihilated. All his relatives were killed. So the guy was in So then he comes back. They have the prisoner exchange. So the first thing they did is they took him. The Israelis knew about this, these tracking devices. So the first thing they did surgery to take out this tracking device. Then, to add insult to injury, the Israelis do not treat prisoners of war like returning war heroes. The Israeli attitude is, well, you should have died fighting. So he never got government reparations. 30 years later, he's got back trouble, right? And he's died, but he davens 3 times a day, and he's a Shomer Shabbos Jew. That's what it means that a person serves by day and by night. You could go through a tremendous amount, and you're still a Shomer Shabbos Jew. Was he sore with the Israeli government, boy? Ooh, he was not a happy camper. He says, we never got any reparations, not a dime, because they don't treat you like you should have died. You should have died. You should have fought to the death. That's what that was. The Germans did that, and the Russians did that. The Russians in World War II, the Russian prisoners of war that came back, a lot of them were executed. You should have died. What did you get captured for? So that's what it means to serve Hashem by day and by night. That's story number 1. Story number 2 was a couple. Listen, I told this story to my kids at Charles Shudis once when they were little. The lights are down. It's like Anima. At Charles Shudis. Now I made a mistake because my mother was there at the time, but I told them the following story. There was a couple got married, and a short time, about 3 months after they got married, this couple was in a car accident, and the husband, his brain stem was shattered, so he was a vegetable on a respirator. At a certain point, the doctor said there's no hope for recovery. The doctor said no hope for recovery, and it's just a matter of time. Yeah, time started dragging on, and the guy was still on this respirator. Time started elapsing, and the wife realized that she doesn't have a husband and she can't marry anybody else because her husband's alive and he can't give her a get. So she's an aguna. She's basically chained. Time started passing by, and she realized that this could go on for a while. Doctors said that this could go on. It's unpredictable how long it's going to be. And they have to, she decided to make a life for herself. So she went to medical school. And while she was in medical school, once a week she would come in and sit with her husband for 10 minutes. She would sit in her room and she would leave. She graduated medical school, already started working as a doctor. So you can imagine how much time has elapsed. It's already 6, 7, 8 years. Once a week she comes in, sits there for 10 minutes, and she leaves. And then one day, because of her medical background, she was sitting in her room, and she could tell that her husband was showing signs of having a heart attack. Now, she had 2 choices. She could either do nothing and let him die and be released from this Gehenna, or she could have pushed the button for assistance, apply CPR, and so on and so forth. So she immediately, without a moment's hesitation, pushed the button, applied CPR, and kept him alive. Then she went to Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein, Rav Elyashiv's son-in-law, and one of the biggest medical poskim today, and she asked him if she was obligated to do that. And he said to her, the Torah says, Lo samod adam reacha. You're not allowed to stand by while your fellow Jew dies. The Torah doesn't distinguish between if he's healthy or not healthy. You had an obligation to do everything you could do. Then he said to her, no one whose ancestors did not stand at Har Sinai would have been capable of doing such a thing. Only somebody who is a Torah Jew could possibly have done such a thing. That means that it's not easy. So I told the story to my kids. They were real little at the time. I don't know if my oldest son, I don't know if it was bar mitzvah yet. And my mother's sitting at the table, and I finished telling this story, and the kids are just looking at me like this. Yeah? And my mother looks at me and she goes, and then, and I know what that meant, the happy ending. And I said, no, Mom, that was the happy ending. Wow. It's not the happy ending we would have written if we were writing the script. I wanted to teach my kids something. It's the happy ending that a Jew does what they have to do under all circumstances. Right? That's the happy ending. That the Jew does what they have to do under all circumstances. That's what it means. That's what it means. Everybody serves by day and by night. Okay? Now, the Torah then goes on, and this I want to clarify because a lot of people have trouble with this. The Torah says, in Pasuk page 418, this has to be clear because people are confused about this. Good morning, Mordechai. Oh, first of all, 1 second. Sorry. Skipped too far. Top of 418. After 6 years, he's supposed to go free. Right? After 6 years, he goes free. Then on the top of page 418 it says, V'im Amar Yomar Ha'eved. If the slave says, Ahavti es Adoni, I love my master, es ishti ve'es banai, my wife and my children, lo eitzei chavshi, I don't want to leave. He loves his non-Jewish maidservant wife and the children. I don't want to go free. So what do? V'higishu Adonav el Elohim. They take him to the court. That's not Hashem's name. V'higishu el hadeles ohel amezuzah. They bring him to the door or the doorpost, and it means the door. The doorpost is there to tell us that the door has to be upright. They do it while he's standing up. V'rotza Adonav es ozno bamartzeya. They drill his ear into the door. Va'avodo la'olam, and then he serves them forever. And forever doesn't mean forever. It means until Yovel, till the 50th year. And he becomes what's called, I think this is where they got the expression of the indentured servant, right? They drill his ear, they put him up against the door, and they drill his ear, and it hits the door. Now, what's going on here is, this is a guy who believes, I mean, what happens to an Evan Ivri? You go and you live with somebody, you don't have any bills to pay, you don't have to worry about anything. All you have to do is work, and you have food, room, board, your family's taken care of. It's kind of like living on kibbutz. Comes along the Torah, and the Torah says, no, that's not the idea. That's not the idea. You have a flaw. You obviously have a flaw in your faith in God. A, you stole. And by the way, there are commentaries that say that's why he marries a non-Jewish maidservant. Why does a man steal? Hello to already time people, you're going to love this. Why does a man steal? Because his wife was pressuring him to live above his standard. So since she pressured him to steal, she suffers the indignity of knowing that her husband is living with, she's got a competitor now. She's got a co-wife, a non-Jewish maidservant. That's the punishment to the wife for pushing her husband to live above his standard. Okay? That's what one of the commentaries says. Now, at the bottom line is, this guy is supposed to leave. You want to stay? In other words, you missed the whole point over here. We were freed from Egypt. We're not supposed to be servants to a human master. We're supposed to serve God. This guy has a faith problem. You stole because you don't believe God could provide parnasa for you. And now you're going to stay on till 49 years. You still don't think that you could go out and figure out how to make a living and God will take care of you? So you believe that the door of parnasa is closed to you. It's as if you see parnasa is a closed door. So what do? They drill your ear into the door. And this, now you have the indignity of walking around where everybody knows this is a guy who would rather stay with his non-Jewish wife than go free and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the what do you call it? That's what by the way, the word martseya, which is the drill, if you take a look at the fourth line, he drills his ear ba martseya with a drill. Martseya, take a look at the numerical value. A mem is 40, a resh is 200, is 240, tzaddik is 90, is 330, and an ayin is 70. So what is martseya? 400, which alludes to the fact that we're supposed to be slaves in Egypt for 400 years. This guy has not gotten out of that mindset of serving a human master. You're supposed to be serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, his ear gets drilled. The word Deles, El Hadeles, right? So we're supposed to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his Hashem Echad. And if you change the Daled to a Resh, what do you get? Acher. So rather than staying with the nation that lives with Hashem Echad, he wants to connect himself and join up with somebody who comes from a nation that believes in Acher. Okay? So a Daled, in other words, he's trading that Resh for a Daled. He's trading the Daled for a Resh. How do you spell the word Daled? If you want to spell the letter Daled in Hebrew, you know how you spell it? Daled, Lamed, Tuf. It's actually Dalet, not Daled. Dalet. We say Daled. So it's the exact same letters as the word Deles. You nail him on the door, on the Daled. That Hashem Echad, which is supposed to be your total focus of your life, that you've traded in. So we nail you on the Daled. Okay, now, I got it right in the Daled. So they got him. Now, so he's been drilled. Now, one of the commentaries points out Take a look at the top line. The Mamar Yomar Eved Ahavti es Adoni es Ishti ve'es Banai lo Eitzei Chofshi. So who are we talking about over here? We're talking about every single human being you probably ever meet. Because every single human being says, I got to take care of my family. I got to take care of my wife. I got to take care of my kids. And therefore, I don't want to go free. I don't have time to learn Torah. I got to work. I got to make more money. I got to take care of my family. Yeah, do you guys remember Muhammad Ali? You've heard of Muhammad Ali? I don't know what you guys have heard of, what you haven't heard of. If it's not, I don't know. Yeah, we're talking a good few years later. Muhammad Ali, I remember an interview with Muhammad Ali where they asked him why he continues boxing. He has enough money that he has $60,000 a month for life. If he would retire right now. Okay, it doesn't sound like a lot. In those days, what was $60,000? Let's call it $600,000 now. Whatever it was at the time, even $60,000, I could get used to that, right? $60,000, he gets that $60,000 a month. So why do you keep fighting? He says, because I need $80,000 a month. That was his cutesy answer, right? But there are people who do that all the time. People keep working and working and working and working and working. Why? Got to take care of my wife and my kids. I got to save up for the future. And therefore what? Ahavti es Adoni es ishti ve'es banai lo eitzei chofshi. I don't want to go free. He never goes free. He never gets free in order to live life and focus on what's really important in life. Okay. Take a look at the next pasuk, the next section. 4 lines to the top. V'chi'im kor ishes bito la'ama. When a man sells his daughter as a maidservant. What's the first problem with that, gentlemen? You sell your daughter? What kind of father would sell his daughter? Are you kidding? He sells his daughter. Lo tzei could say sa'avadim. She doesn't leave like the normal rules of slave. What father is going to slave his daughter? Okay, so what does the Torah go on to say? He sells her to this Jewish master. And the ideal thing is for this Jewish master who's bought her, that either he or his son should marry her. It means the purchase money becomes the Kiddushin money. All he's got to do is say, Hareat miyu edes li, with the money that I gave your father. And he marries her, or his son should marry her. So the Gemara says, who are we talking about here? Who would sell his daughter? Who would sell his daughter? The only one who would sell their daughter is a guy who's destitute. Guy has no money. He needs to feed her. She needs to get fed. He's doing her a favor. It's not just hey, good, I got another one. Mazel tov, it's a girl. Great. There's an investment down the line. I sold 2 of them, I'll sell the third one. If I play my cards right, I can make $1 million here. That's not what the Torah's talking about. A man who's destitute. This guy can't feed her. What's the next best thing? I know a woman in Chicago whose mother put her on a train when she was 5 years old. A good one from, I think it was Holland. The Germans had come into town. If it was Holland, or I think it was in Amsterdam, the Germans had invaded. The mother took her and put her on a train. Just put a 5-year-old girl, 4 or 5-year-old, put her on a train because anything was better than what was about to happen. And she said somebody's train, just take care of her, will you? I knew this woman. This was already grandmother. I was friends with her kid. She was a grandmother already. And this woman, she said she never forgave her mother. She never forgave her mother. Why? You don't put a 5-year-old on a train by themselves. You can't go argue with emotions. Go argue. But at the end of the day, sometimes you do the lesser of 2 evils. The Torah is talking about a man whose daughter came. So at least she may get married. She'll get fed. Something. That's who we're talking about over here. Not talking about just selling your daughters. Not only that, my daughter was 7 years old, and she was giving me some cheek. At some point, I don't know what it was. She was talking. I said to her, according to halacha, I could sell you if I want to. She looked at me, she said, yeah, but you're not going to. And I was like, oh, 1 second, that wasn't the script. She was supposed to start saying, Daddy, no, please, no, not her. She just called my bluff, okay. Onto that. So, all right, I got her. I married her off. Not at 7. What do you call it? So the Torah is telling you over here, we're talking about what's best for her. Then the Torah talks about a rule for wives in general. At the bottom of the page it says, Ima cheres yikach lo. Now, let's say the master or his son has married her. Well, they may have an attitude of, after all, we got her as a maid to begin with, and then he marries a second wife also. He takes a second wife, a nice, what do you call it, from a prominent, says the Torah, Ima cheres yikach lo, if he takes another wife, she'ira ksusa ve'onosa lo yigra. He is not allowed to deprive her of her marital, what she's entitled to in marriage. Food, clothing, and her marital rights. He's not allowed to decrease it from her. He has to treat her like a regular wife. This is the source for the Torah obligation that a husband has to his wife. That a man has these obligations. Now, if you look in the written Torah, marriage is only discussed twice in the written Torah. And both times in the written Torah, it is the husband's obligation to the wife. Feminists never complain about that, by the way. It's the husband's obligation to the wife. Here, it says what the wife is entitled to from her husband. And later on, in Parshas Kiseitze, it says that when a man marries a woman, he is not allowed, he has to stay close to home for a year, because v'simach es ishto, he has to gladden his wife the first year of marriage. The obligation is on the husband. And in the written Torah, it does not talk about a wife making her husband. To the contrary, Rashi points out later on, it doesn't say he should be happy with her, that they should make each other happy. Let's stay home and make each other happy, which is a recipe for disaster. That's not what the Torah says. The Torah says he has to gladden her. He has the obligations on the husband. How do you like that? The feminists never complain about. Then the Gemara, in Ksubis, the Gemara talks about what a wife's obligations are, in Torah Shabbal Peh. Here, the Torah says the obligations are fully on him. There was one other point here. Okay, I forgot what I was going to say. All right. Take a look at any questions on that, by the way. Any questions on the Eved Ivri business? It's a little, it runs a little bit contrary to what we normally think of in terms of. And again, he's not a slave. He's not a slave. He's a Hebrew hired hand. Okay. Yeah.
So, does he go free during the Yovel year, even if he?
I think so. Even if it's not 6 years. Even if it's not 6 years. It gets a little. I'm pretty sure. Yovel, they all go free. Yovel, everybody goes free.
Even if he got the little thing on his ear.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. That he stays till the Yovel year. 50 year, he doesn't work for 50 years. 50 Olam means until the Yovel. If it's 3 years before the Yovel, he goes out of the Yovel. That's for sure. Yes. And not only he goes free, the master then has to give him gifts. The master has to give this. The Gemara talks about a certain amount of material goods that you have to give him. There's a guy in America that they just freed after about 30 years in prison. That the guy they decided that he was in prison for about 30 years for murdering somebody, and then they realized that he didn't do it. They just let him go. I think they got, what's it called when you collect money on the internet? What's it called?
Is it pension?
No. When people donate money, when you have a
GoFundMe?
something like that. Yes, they made. They already, within a couple of days, already had over $1 million that people had given to this guy. And then the government gives you money and that sort of thing. Sirhan, they're not letting out of prison. You know who Sirhan is? Tell me, guys, come on! What have you been doing? Sirhan's learned Torah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, Sirhan was the guy who killed Robert Kennedy. I was a little kid at the time. I remember that. Sirhan shot Robert Kennedy, so he was up for parole. He's about 78 now, and that was, I think, in 1968. And he was up for parole, and they turned down the parole. Yeah, that's a long time, 50 years ago, over 50 years ago. They turned down the parole. Yeah, he did. They say he's a danger to. He's a menace to society. Okay, take a look at Pasuk Yud Tes, and here we have an interesting question. Let's say a person gets sick. So, one second. No, I skipped. Take way before that. Yud Dalet. Sorry, Yud Dalet. Make ish v'meis mosu mas. If a person kills somebody and he dies, this person should die. V'asher lo tzada. Now, if you have not, how's the article translate tzada? He's not laying in ambush. In other words, you didn't kill the guy intentionally, Veha Elokim ina liyodo, God brought it about. V'samti l'chav makom asher yonus shama. I'll make a place for him to run there. This is a reference to the cities of refuge, exactly what we're talking about. You killed somebody unintentionally, they're cities of refuge. Now, again, the idea behind the city of refuge is you killed somebody unintentionally. It wasn't a shogeg karov la'onis, it wasn't shogeg karov la'mezid. It was a shogeg. When you're a shogeg and you kill somebody unintentionally, that means that you have too little concern for human life. You went out to the forest and you swung an axe and the top of the axe went flying off. Why did it happen to you and it didn't happen to you? The answer is because you checked, double-checked, and triple-checked the axe to make sure it wouldn't happen. And you were so excited about going out to the forest, you just grabbed the axe and started chopping. But you should have thought for a second there might be somebody in the vicinity, and therefore you need some sort of atonement. Now, the problem is, what happens to a person who killed somebody unintentionally, but didn't go to the city of refuge? Then you got another person who killed somebody intentionally, but he was never executed because nobody was there to see it. Oh, so how do you reconcile that? Take a look at the Rashi here. The Rashi on Pasuk Yud Beis. Veha Elokim ina liyodo. It's, oh boy, right column of Rashi, 9/16 of the way down the page. Right column of Rashi. Try me. Right? And you see where it is about a little past the halfway mark on the page. So it says, go down 10 lines from the bottom. 10 lines from the bottom, third word on the line. B'maha kosuv medaber. If you find it, please show the person next to you. What's the pasuk you're talking about? Bishnei b'nei adam. We're talking about two people. Echad harag shogeg. One guy killed b'shogeg. See how it's all one Torah, gentlemen. Say the same words, same concepts. Doesn't matter if you're learning Baba Kama. Doesn't matter if you're in Mishpatim. Echad harag shogeg ve'echad harag mezid. One guy killed by accident. One guy killed intentionally. V'lo hayu eidim b'davar sheya'idu. Neither of them had witnesses. One guy swung a hatchet in the forest and there were no witnesses there, and this guy shot somebody and there are no witnesses there. So zelo nerag v'zelo gola. Now this guy was not executed. Reuven wasn't executed, and Shimon didn't go to Golos. There were no witnesses. Oh, because Baruch Hu doesn't leave the world random and haphazard. Brings them all both to one inn. A pundak is one inn or a hostel. The guy who killed intentionally happens to find himself under a ladder. And the guy who killed b'shogeg, he's going up the ladder. The other guy is sitting there minding his own business underneath the ladder. Never a good idea to sit under a ladder. Now the guy going up the ladder falls on the guy down below and he kills him. The witnesses, now there happen to be witnesses there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings it all together. And he has to go to Golos. The guy who killed and unintentionally goes to Golos. The guy who killed intentionally, he ends up getting executed. So what happened? Reuven falls. Reuven killed somebody intentionally. Shimon killed unintentionally. Neither had witnesses. Shimon climbs up a ladder. Reuven's underneath the ladder, and he falls down on him. And that's why the commentaries say, V'asher lo tzoda, he didn't do it intentionally. Second line from the top. V'ha'elokim ina liyodo. God brought it about. What is the word Elokim? Which midah is Elokim? Din, justice, strict. You'll see that there's going to be strict justice in the world. There's going to be justice in the world. It's all going to work out perfectly. God isn't going to let the world run haphazardly. One of the commentators actually points out what's the punishment for murder? What's the punishment for murder? Which one of the four? Which capital punishment is for murder? is beheading, is level 3. And which is the punishment? A guy who falls on somebody is really more like what? It's like stoning, which is level 1. He doesn't deserve to be stoned. Doesn't deserve to be stoned. Why should a guy fall on him? So when a commentator says, sure, he falls on him with a knife in his hand. And he stabbed him with the knife when he fell. You understand? A guy climbed the ladder with a knife. He was going to scrape something off the ceiling. Right? In other words, it's got to be so perfect. It's got to be so perfect. If God's bringing out perfect justice, then he's got to die exactly the way he's meant to die. If a guy falls on him, that's not the way he's meant to die. For murder, you don't die for skila. In murder, a person dies through beheading. So it's got to be some sort of stabbing action over here. I mean, it's a good shot. Ow! A guy falls off the ladder. Ow! Like that, trying to catch himself. Exactly how that works, But at the end of the day, he's showing you that there's a certain precision. There's an absolute precision. Yes, you had a question? Somebody had a question.
A while ago.
Okay, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, this isn't a complaint as much as like a halakhic question.
Yeah.
Why are there no slaves anymore?
Why are there no slaves? The Hebrew slaves stopped at the time of the where there's no more Yovel, there's no more Hebrew slaves.
Okay.
Not a complaint. The Gemara says in the future we're going to have, every Jew is going to have 700, on each corner of our tzitzis we're going to have 700 servants. On each corner of our tzitzis.
Sounds like too many.
Well, we'll find something for them to do. You'll we'll be okay. Well, better too many than not enough.
So people went out, slaves went out?
Yeah. There's no more Eved Ivri. No more Eved Ivri. But non-Jewish slaves is like this. It's a tricky thing. You live in a society where slavery is forbidden. You don't have a choice. You cannot take slaves. Theoretically, that never ended. A non-Jewish slave never ended. In the most extreme case that I know of is that when somebody takes a non-Jewish slave, called an Eved Knaini. It's called an Eved Knaini, but that could be on any non-Jewish slave. A non-Jewish slave goes through a semi-conversion. The semi-conversion is that when you have the non-Jewish slave living with you, they are not allowed to. They do not have the positive obligations, but they're not allowed to commit averas. Because they're living on your property. You can't have a non-Jewish slave living on your property. The guy's turning lights on and off on Shabbos. He's eating treif, and he's living in your house. You can't have such a situation. It just doesn't work. So he goes through what's called a conversion for avdus. He's still not Jewish. But all you got to do to make him Jewish then, at that point, is release him. And all of a sudden, so I understand. How can you release the guy and he becomes Jewish? Whatever happened to going into the mikveh and having a bris milah? He has the bris milah and goes to the mikveh just to become your non-Jewish slave. Then all it takes is to release him. And the Gemara brings down. We learned that last time in Gittin. You remember they went into shul. They needed a minyan. They only had 9 guys and a slave, so they released him. Oh, he's Jewish, right? Iskadash, and now we got a minyan. It's not my river. Now we finally got a So when you have the non-Jewish slave, there's a very strange halacha. Theoretically, it could happen nowadays. And I'll tell you one of the most bizarre cases. Somebody is a mamzer. Remember we spoke about a mamzer? A mamzer, he has a problem because his children are mamzerim. Now, a mamzer is allowed to marry a non-Jewish woman, is allowed to marry a slave. A mamzer could marry a slave, an eved. He could then have children with the eved. The children follow the genealogy of the mother. He can marry a shifcha knainis. The children take on her genealogy, the children are not Jewish. By non-Jews, there's no mamzerim. So now this mamzer has children who are not Jewish, but it was a permissible union. He wasn't just living with a non-Jewish woman. He's living with a woman who was a shifcha. He marries the shifcha, has non-Jewish children, then they convert to Judaism, so they're 100% Jews. So That's how a mamzer could have, that's the only way a mamzer could have non-mamzer children. Because if he marries a regular mamzer, which he's allowed to, then their children are also mamzerim. So the mamzer has the potential to have, the Gemara in Kedusha says, he has the potential to have, and so apparently, I've never seen it documented, apparently there have been cases in the contemporary world of people who found out they were mamzerim. They went off somewhere like Saudi Arabia or something, wherever it was, and bought a slave, and had children, and freed the children, and made the children into Jews. Apparently there have been cases like that. And I can't say that authoritatively. I've never seen it. I've never seen official documentation, but I have heard stories of such cases. Right? There are stories of such cases. Okay, but that's about the only way he could do it. Now, you have another problem here. The Torah says, 5 lines from the top. 4 lines from the top. When a man intentionally wants to kill somebody, you take him from the altar in the Beis Hamikdash. A guy kills somebody and then he runs to the Beis Hamikdash and grabs the altar. Maybe I'll be safe over there. As I say, he murdered somebody, you take him out and you execute him. So, the Meshech Chochmah, somebody say, it's pretty strange, kill, tag, I'm holding the Mizbeach, you can't kill me now, I got to home base, what's going on? Why would the Torah say a case like, why would a person be running to the Mizbeach? So the Meshech Chochmah says like this, very interesting concept. In order to kill, you need 2 things. You need opportunity and you need motivation. You need opportunity, you need motivation. You got to have a reason. There's always an opportunity to kill people. You need a reason to kill people. The Meshech Chochmah says, who among the Jewish people had a reason to kill somebody? Very often it was the Kohanim. The Kohanim were in the Beis Hamikdash. And there were a lot of women, on a regular basis, women were coming to the Beis Hamikdash to bring their offerings, their korbanos. A woman was purifying herself or whatever the situation was. There was a steady flow of women coming to the Beis Hamikdash. So the Kohanim were meeting women all the time. Now, what if the Kohen took a liking to a certain married woman? Well, he doesn't have the option of marrying her if her husband divorces her, because the Kohen's not allowed to marry a divorcee. He's only got one option, if she becomes a widow. And therefore, it could very well be that he'll make her a widow. Right? And so the Torah says, even him, the Torah says, here you have a person who is by the Mizbeach. Who's by the Mizbeach? The Kohanim are by the Mizbeach. So even that Kohen is the guy who has a situation where there's a certain vulnerability there. He's got opportunity because he's meeting these women, and he may decide he wants to marry these women, and therefore he may kill the husband. Therefore the Torah says, specifically, from the Mizbeach, you take him out to execute him. Then the Torah says, Umake avi v'imo mosima. Somebody hits the parents, is executed. If you strike your parents, you die. Now, that's only if you draw blood, or if you perpetrate a wound which draws blood. If you draw blood or a bruise. If you bruise your parents, that's a what do you call it? That's also the same as drawing blood. Then a person is liable for the death penalty. This is one of the reasons why a Jewish doctor generally does not give his father an injection. Parents should not be injected by their son, the doctor, because the son, the doctor, unless it's obviously a situation where there's no choice, there's nobody around, they need an injection, the son's got to do it. But it's not ideal. It's not ideal for the son to treat the father, and anything that a child does. In self-defense is something else. Father's coming to strike a kid has to defend himself, it's something else. But to go and bruise or hit the parents, then a person is liable for the death penalty. Then the Torah says something very strange. The Torah says, "V'gonev ish umecharo." If a man kidnaps somebody, v'nimtza b'yodo mos yumas. The Torah talks about kidnapping. Then it goes back to the parents. Umekalel avivim mos yumas. Somebody who curses his parents is liable for death penalty. So the commentaries ask, why does the Torah insert that in the middle? The Torah talks about hitting parents, kidnapping, and then cursing parents. Well, I mean, it seems about out of order. Let's finish with the parent. Let's finish with the parents first. Hitting parents, cursing parents, and then kidnapping. Right? Why is that inserted in the middle? Why is that inserted in the middle? Seems like a little bit out of place. So a couple of commentaries, a couple of unfortunate. They say like this: let's say a kid is kidnapped when he's a child. Somebody kidnapped a child and sold him. He was raised somewhere else. And then one day he sees this man and he happens to either hit him or curse him. And what he doesn't know is that it's his parents. That a person could actually be in a situation where as a result of kidnapping, he will end up cursing his parents. Or one day he finds out that the people who raised him aren't his parents. And therefore he curses his real parents for allowing him to have been kidnapped. Understand? You could be in a situation. The most extreme opinion I saw is the Amek Dover by the Netziv. He says that cursing your parents doesn't even have to be cursing by name. It could be a kid who grows up and he says, my father, whoever his father happens to be, he curses his father with Hashem's name. So he doesn't even have to know that who his father is. All he has to do is, that's why he talks about kidnapping first. He says, a person could be kidnapped, doesn't even know his parents, yet he can still be liable for the death penalty for cursing his parents, because the curse, all it has to do is for whoever that person was, who was my father. And therefore the Torah puts that inside. All right, TBC.